Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Conversations about Art. My name is J. Allen Constant. I am from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm here with Paul Rowland, who lives in Tokyo, Japan. Today, we're going to be talking to Claire Bowen, an abstract artist from Tallahassee, Florida. So, welcome, Claire.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to be here. I'm so honored.
Well, it's good to have you. We'd like to start the conversation just by asking you how you got into art, whatever background or education you've had. So tell us about yourself.
Okay. It's always been a part of my life. I was drawing from very young age and would sit and listen to music and just draw as a child. So always doodling, sketching, automatic writing, anything I can get my hands on to do art or to do some kind of artistic thing. Um, then I did go on to major in art in college, and I was at the University of Georgia, which has a very strong art department, and I went to Cortona, Italy for a semester to study there with their art program, and then graduated with a degree in art from Columbus State University, and just had a wonderful couple, two or three special artists who were mentors. And so that was just a great thing. I, for many years, then raised my family, was concentrating on motherhood. And so kept my hand in, kept doing art, but not seriously until later in life, retirement and so on. And so for the last few years, I've been trying to just get more done, more concentrated artwork. And frankly, the best way to put it is I want to be as good as I can get. So that's what I'm trying to do, and to get it out there, perhaps, so others can share in that world with me. So that's where I am now.
Sounds great. Let's take a look at your work. Okay, this first piece called At the Lake. As I look at it, it kind of reminds me of a patchwork quilt in a way. Does quilting have any influence on your work?
Yeah, very nice. I don't quilt, but I have ancestors who do and have a great appreciation of quilting and of that sort of segmented way of looking at things that quilting involves. I do sew, and so yeah, it really resonates with me, that idea of always the idea of handwork and the human hand in things. So yeah, I really appreciate that you think it looks quilt-like. It does show some of my process. It's a collage, and I do start works usually with a lot of messing around, a lot of scribbling and mark making, and this one started that way. And you can see some of the loops I use in some of that sort of beginning stage. And then I go back into a piece to refine it. I think about clay sculpture. You put in, you take out, um, and and I guess in a way I sort of set up. It's kind of like an archaeological dig where you go in and try to see what you can find. Only as artists, we provide our own sediment. So, so a lot of my process involves going into a mess and trying to see what's in there that might be worth highlighting. So I did that with this, and opaque paint, transparent or translucent uh, areas, and then it just began to look like boats and sails. So I do paint intuitively. So I did not have any sort of water or boat imagery in mind. It just happened as I thought the composition in the mess.
So when you start making marks on the paper, they're not of anything specific, they're just kind of random marks.
I do have some favorite sort of things that my hand seems to do. um, Loops and kind of asymmetric writing sorts of shapes. I I guess there are other pieces where I can get into more of this, but I do like pattern, and so often I will work with maybe checkerboard or diamond, sort of under uh, under layer, and then sort of see what seems to come through. Those curved half circle, there's some of those shapes. Yeah, so loops and scribbles like writing, yeah, those will show up often. The sort of half circle arch, that kind of thing.
Do you ever make marks with your non-dominant hand?
Oh, I should do more of that. I do that sometimes. Yeah, good idea to do more of that because I do like that quality of. Oh, I've got a wonderful quote that I pulled out just for this purpose. It's Ray Bradbury, and he's talking about writing, but it applies to art. He says, "Your intuition knows what to write, so get out of the way." I'll have to admit, sometimes I really have to stretch to get titles. Um, I don't know. Pieces seem to say certain things to me, but I don't know that that would necessarily be something that would communicate to other people very well. And so I like to have a sense of connectedness, that it sort of, since it's abstract, tells somebody kind of what they're looking at. On the other hand, I really like when people come to my work and say, "Oh, I see this," or "I see that." So I enjoy that. That's a nice perspective that opens up new ideas often.
Again, I'm entranced by your use of color. That's what really draws me in. Can you talk a little bit
Okay.
about how you use color? You say you paint intuitively. Are you making any choices before you start painting? How does that work for you?
Sometimes I start with sort of what's the leftover paint I have, or what's a color I really hate and would like to challenge myself with. And I mean, it just varies. And then sometimes it's, ooh, I just really like this color that I would like to focus on. And I don't remember on this one what I did to choose those colors, but I was interested in the warm tones and started working with those. But a lot of what I do is I'm trying to see what colors that are in the same general value, how they work together. And I'm very interested in the really it's texture, I think, that happens when you put colors of similar value together and see what happens. And then I'm interested in drawing and how that looks with those colors and how that works together. Then what can I really love saturated color, and this one didn't have much, so I went back in and brightened up the oranges. So it's a process of sort of seeing what works with what and how it works with the composition. And yeah, do I need to go brighter or darker? I have certain color combinations I really enjoy. I love the browns with black, and I like drawing. I like to have the graphite in there and see what happens there. And then I just really like bright colors too. So, it's a hash. What do I do with all of that to get all that to work, or get some of it to work sometimes?
Thank you. Yeah, I really, really admire the texture in your paintings. I've got to talk to you about the horses. How did they arise from the composition?
I think they sort of galloped in, kind of by surprise. I often find that when I do the sort of the doodling and the scribbling that I do, I'm very interested in softened geometric shapes. And so so often I will try to sort of um, will draw or mark in those kinds of directions, if that makes sense. Sort of, I'll go up and down, and then I'll go across, and so I'll wind up with um, squarish or rectangular shapes that way. I'll doodle curves, and then sometimes they'll become trees or bushes or yeah. So that's kind of how some of those basic shapes happen. I think at one point there must have been some striping in there that began to look like legs, and so and so I developed so the horses came to grace.
Oh, wonderful.
So
Can you just tell us about this text, this torn paper in the middle there? How did that occur?
yeah, I have a good friend, another artist friend, give a little shout out to Gloria Gella, and she gave a little critique, needed a little more contrast. And so I agreed. And so I tore out the paper. Usually I go back in and work a little on collaged pieces so they don't look so raw. And in this one, there's a little of that, but it happened to be a nice enough shape, I thought, that it enhanced the mountainous feeling or that feeling of landscape. And so I left it. There's no meaning at all to the word idea, except that those that side view of words looked like line. I'm a word person, and I love using letters and words in collage, and that does refer to a love of books and reading and writing, and yeah, so it all goes together, right? Music, art, writing, dance. Thanks to my parents, I was introduced to classical music at a young age, and have very eclectic tastes. There are waveforms in here that seem to me to be similar to melody. That wasn't intentional, but it very much has a rhythm, the rhythm of water and waves. So, and that happened later. That happened, or as I was developing the composition, it was I was working with contrast, high contrast, subtle contrast within very similar values, as I've mentioned before. And then here came wave-like shapes. There they were. I was working with curves, and they ended up sort of connecting and looking wave-like. So when that happens, I tend to then to try to extend that. But a lot of times, I'll just be honest, I mess that up if I get too literal. So I try to have the right place to stop, right? And that's sometimes that's a little hard not to get too literal.
How long does it take for you to put together a piece typically?
Yeah, wow. Somebody else has asked me that, and that was hard to say. Some of them, most of mine do take time because they will sit around for a while. I'm also an OCD person, and so I get very very involved with just the right angle or just the right curve. It takes a long time. Usually, it's most works are not quick for me. I hope they look spontaneous, but they often are very much not.
Falling into place. So, does that refer to how this came together, or does it refer to something else?
It looked a little like things falling into place. There are things in this that look hieroglyphic to me. There's something about that middle right shape, the bigger shape that looks Egyptian, and then the two red and black shapes that are in the very center. It looks very eclectic to me. And I remember when I was working on it, I started as I always do, lots of mess, and then back into it, working and working and working to get the shapes right. And boy, there were layers when they weren't. They were really, really not working, They were bothersome. And so that took a lot of effort to there again, that there was that quality of, as I worked, of poetic, getting a curve right, getting getting a space right, or the spaces between things right, or then the colors, getting them in the right places. There's lots of the opaque paint in there, the glazing that I enjoy.
I can see some shapes in here that are reminiscent to me, maybe of musical instruments. I don't know if you see that at all. So I'm getting a
Uh-huh.
little bit of like cubism, maybe Braque, as opposed to Picasso. But I also saw some Kandinsky before in the waveforms, and later on, there are a couple of your paintings that really remind me of Paul Klee. Do you mind talking
Oh,
a little bit about your influences?
thank you so much, even for making those references. And they're not conscious, you know. I love that you say that about the instruments in this one. I've done some stencils that I use to break up space sometimes, and just to do something that's not so, I don't know, go in and just do my usual circle or my usual square, something that just sort of breaks up the look. And I did that with this piece. There are those splashed areas that actually probably I didn't use ink. It was just scribbled thinner black paint. Thanks for the clay reference there. I think there's some, I know I'm working some in small squares, small diamonds, those kinds of shapes that I loved in his work. The Impressionists get me, but I really like some precision too. You named people I admire.
What is the role of memory in your work? Like when you're
Oh,
painting, you say it's spontaneous, but what are you thinking of?
um, yeah, I may not consciously be thinking of memories, but very, very often, like the talking about the quilt shapes. There's one we'll get to, with what ended up looking like talk bubbles. The memories of conversations with my grandmother and the women in my family, memories of wonderful trips we've taken, or places we've visited. I'm actually a religious person, and I am a Christian artist, but I who does not paint religious paintings, but those kinds of influences really are there. The ethereal, the spiritual. I do consciously avoid painting about angst and chaos, and I want people, when they see my work, to have to take away some sense of beauty and some sense of perhaps their own experience of memory or dreams, or something that is beyond ourselves. So I want people to carry away a kind of a sense of warmth and wonder, and if it's not too big a stretch, of the divine. They often feel very spiritual. And then I tie them maybe to more earthly things like Florida snow, um, with this one. And it has a broader context to me as I do the work. I think nature connects us with the divine, and so I hope there's something reverential about it, or something of wonder. I like for people to think as well as feel. I want them to sense something that's like, oh, okay, that's I hadn't thought of that, or hadn't felt that way.
I notice in both this one and the previous piece, compositionally, it feels very balanced. I mean, do you have to work, juggle things back and forth to create a sense of balance in your work?
Yes, it's very important, but it doesn't come easily. Yeah, I work really hard. I like things to be offset. I don't really like equal balance, but I do work at having them balanced in some way.
Well, for me, balance creates a restfulness. I feel like I'm not fighting with the painting. I can just kind of rest in the piece, and that's what I get from your work.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice. To me, there seems like there's so much going on in there that a lot of times I worry that might be what's communicated. So I really am grateful that you see that. Thank you.
I love the messy dirty quality of this, if you'll forgive the word. This one seems slightly different, maybe, to some of your others. There seems to be more of the board or canvas exposed. How did this one come about?
Yeah, I think I sanded some areas in this. What I wanted to do, this is some time back that I did this piece. I wanted to use hot pink, see if I could do it and make it work and not look like bubble gum. So then to do that, I have to put some desaturated areas in there. So it really did start with this big color explosion. And then let's see how we can make that actually work and not be a hot pink, be a hot mess. So that's what I was doing. And I love that gray. It's a kind of a yellowish, has a yellow tinge to it. And I don't know, it ended up with how do I make that big expanse of gray interesting? And we sanded and we we kept doing stuff to it and then added the black. And by the time here again, it ended up looking very much like rain to me, like a rainy street where you would see neon lights reflected in the wet pavement, that kind of thing, or buildings in the distance. That's how that came about. Was interested in those contrasts.
Yeah, it's really evocative, and as you describe it in that way, I can really see that, and I have memories of of streets like that as well. And just briefly, could you tell us about the formats? Like very often, you seem to use squares, but you chose something different here.
I like to see if I can um, vary what I do with the format. Can I make that work? Most of these things are small, and part of that is because my husband and I travel a great deal, and so I do a lot of portable things. But also, I think smallness invites intimacy. I think largeness to me sort of suggests experience, bigger, wider experience. But I like the intimacy of small pieces. So I try to see what I can make of that space and then maybe take it to a bigger piece. But that's sort of what I'm doing. Can I use that? Can I use that long format, make that work? I do have a tendency to have these little small compositions develop and then, okay, so then what do I do with the rest of it?
Absolutely. How large is this one?
I think it's 14 by 11.
Okay, and how big do you get?
I haven't gotten bigger than about 2 by 3 feet. That's about as big as I've done.
Earlier, Paul was asking you about influences and the artists that he saw. This may sound kind of funny, but one artist I see in your work is Grandma Moses. So when I look at your work, I think of these as primitive abstracts, if that makes sense.
Oh, nice. I like that. Because I like that flattened perspective that's very design oriented. So I really like that reference. That's wonderful. A lot of things seem to me to be aerial views. This is one of them. That's why I titled it the way I did. It looks like, um, yeah, again, those things that we do as humans, we plant beds of flowers, and those are black spots that to me suggested flower beds, but still, the design suggested flower beds, and then the gray and white areas suggested concrete and pavement and there's some buildings in there and it just um, a lot of my pieces strike me that way, aerial, and I like that flight, floating, freedom, flattened perspective, which does have that primitive look.
Well, this is literally called flyover country.
Yeah.
So I can see exactly what you're getting at. Was this inspired by flying over country?
Yeah, it is an example of starting with lots of just marks and paint and stuff, and then the shapes start to look like shapes um, that you see from above, and I don't know, it just it happens because I'm seeking composition and I'm seeking design, and those are the things that seem to come out. Um, Patterns and yeah, like the circles and the zigzag stuff. I wanted to keep the drawing in there. Once again, I was interested in the light next to the dark areas and how can I make the dark area is interesting. So there's this dark brown next to dark blue. And in the whites, I love the ethereal quality of different whites together with the graphite, with the the kind of shaded marks, rubbed, messy. I don't know. It looks very sky-like also to me, which that would not be sky, I guess, if you're flying over something necessarily. But I do like that quality in light areas where there's a lot of texture going on.
I feel like I've just entered a really interesting room and I'm just gradually wandering from one thing to another and just gently
Um,
bumping off things and go, oh, what's that over there? Oh, what's that over there? I like the word ethereal that you use as well. In fact, I really love the way you talk about your work, because you have that
Thank you.
sense of floating, of a kind of airiness, but a lightness as well. So as much as they might be grounded with your titles in something real, there is a real sense of being in a slightly different dimension. For you, what would your ideal exhibition look like if somebody gave you a gallery space and you could fill it with whatever you wanted? How would you arrange that space?
I might try to do it thematically, but also with a nod to how they work together, because a lot of my pieces seem to work together to me. They seem to sort of be dealing with similar ideas or similar feelings.
The title reminds me again of Grandma Moses.
Uh,
Grandma Moses was the first thing I thought of when I saw the title, also. So it seems like there are certain shapes that keep coming up in your work, like half circles, and I notice checks and diamonds. So are there certain symbols or themes that you keep coming back to in your work?
that's interesting. From a very early age, I saw patterns in nature that they would absolutely knock me out. The idea of zebras and leopard spots and flowers that changed color, several colors on a petal. Just the idea of certain shapes and patterns just kind of knocked me out. And also houses. I liked, Paul, that you brought up rooms, because the idea of home, of a house and trees around it, or gardens around it, or those kinds of ideas of flowers and houses. And this one was talk bubbles, and it just made me think of conversation, things being said that float out there that can enhance our lives and could work harm or could work a great good. It's what I see and what I experience in relationships and through faith and through nature, how I interpret those shapes.
Okay,
Um,
well, I just see Paul Clay here. I feel like this is an undiscovered Paul Clay painting. What a wonderful title as well. How does your travel influence your art?
it does. We don't go places that are terribly exotic, but we do travel to the beach and we travel to the mountains. It really is fascinating, the difference you'll see in light and the difference in colors and the different times of day and what you see at those times of day, and architecture. It's in there. That idea of architecture is in my stuff. That again, houses, house shapes. This one, it reflects a lot of the things we've talked about, what to do with those diamonds and triangles and squares and circles and stripes, and how to, I don't know, how to deal with all that, because I love them, right? And so then when I start scribbling and then I start to refine and things start to come out that look like landscape, and it incorporates those ideas. And it's kind of like, I guess if I had a message, it'd be like, look at what's out there, look at what you're seeing that's all around you that maybe you weren't paying attention to. We just need to look.
That's a
If there's a
wonderful
message,
message.
that's probably it.
And
Sorry.
the word kaleidoscopic just came to mind as well.
Ooh,
the
Oh
fact that
gosh.
you resist minimalism, or you feel a certain risk there, but you feel this urge to layer and to add. I've seen so many
Mhm.
different writers and artists who bring it down to essentials and pare things away, and other artists do seem to have a tendency in the other direction as well. And Marc Chagall is someone that maybe not so much in this one, but in your others, your buildings, sort of like memories of people and animals, the different shapes and colors that he has as well, but also the idea of floating over a landscape kind of came to
Oh.
mind.
Well,
Hmm.
you've made such wonderful comments. You've done wonders for my confidence.
Well,
Yes, I like stuff.
and you're so
Yeah.
good at organizing it as well. This is your last one. Or maybe could you
Yeah,
start off by telling us about these maps that you seem to have included?
right, right,
Is that
right.
what you've torn and included in here?
So yeah, I just was working with collage, and started with a layer that ended up the red just kind of looked like it was almost stained. It was so saturated that I thought I really want to keep that. So I worked really hard to make that work. I hope it does. But yeah, then I started with color and then I came in with collage. I really like maps. I have a terrible sense of geography. I never know where I am. I'm just like in la la land most of the time. But I do like maps. I do like that idea that the topography, the design of roads, and what a wonderful human thing that we've made those roads in this naturally occurring God-given landscape, and that we've done these wonderful things that end up looking like gorgeous shapes and lines when you're above them. And so I don't know. I like to use maps. And then I have a lot of marks in there and did some stenciling. And then eventually it was that red. How could I balance it and make it work? And then finally, it's like, what can you do with that? It looks like flames. And so it became, oh, okay. So if I were to camp in the winter, you'd get in the southeast, you'd get slush, maybe patches of white. And so it ended up being winter camping.
Yeah, I was going to comment on your titles. Like you said, they're really difficult, but all your titles seem really poetic. And it seems like you have a natural talent for titles. So they're really hard for you to come up with.
Yeah, they really are. I have done a lot of writing, and so I'm very word conscious. And the hard part is in speaking something that seems true about the work or its process, and then also that might communicate to somebody about just what in the world's going on with it. That kind of seems important to me, not to be too uh, unrelated to the visual. It's just a direction I've chosen to go, but it does make it hard because I might have one thought about it and somebody else might have another. Yeah, I have to work at it.
Well, unfortunately, we need to bring this conversation to a close, but I really appreciate your articulation and talking about your work. And it helps me to appreciate it at a whole new level. So thanks for participating with us.
Oh, thank you. It's just an incredible honor. I surely do appreciate the opportunity. It's such fun, and I admire you both so much. So
Thank you, Claire.
thank you.
Thank you.